What's up, guys? Welcome to the weekly Rescue Michigan podcast. Just me tonight, it seems. I don't know. We may have Patty come on at some point. I did send her the link, but she isn't here, so I don't know. There's plenty to talk about going on in Michigan and in Washington, but I think it's about time we do a show that really talks about Ukraine. Although, don't believe me. First off, we're going to tie this directly into what's going on in American politics, but we've got some other things to talk about this week, too. There has been a little bit of new legislation put in while the lawmakers were on break, and we can talk about some of those. Some interesting things have popped up in Lansing as well. But I think it's time, because I've been avoiding the subject, which I hate to do, but I know, we're Rescue Michigan. It's not a global geopolitics show, but I think it's about time to talk about what's been going on in Ukraine in the past 2 months. The last time we really did a Ukraine update, I believe it was June 4th, and I predicted that there was not going to be much of a Ukrainian offensive. And that was literally the day that the offensive commenced. And now we are 2 months into it, 2 months into the Ukrainian offensive that had been hyped, for months and months and months, it was going to be Ukraine's big breakthrough. They even said the first few days would be decisive. And lo and behold, 2 months later, they have not made one scintilla of progress. According to the news, they have captured a few abandoned villages here and there, which even those they don't really hold on to. Let me put up on the screen here. This is a story that just came out a day or so ago. Hold on, let me pull this up here. This is from NBC News. Is Ukraine's counteroffensive failing? Kiev and its supporters worry about losing control of the narrative. That's what they're worried about, the narrative. The narrative. Some U.S. officials are frustrated at the pace of Ukraine's counteroffensive, which has gained less than 100 square miles of territory, which is absolutely incredible. This is the offensive that, if you see here what they were talking about, they gave Ukraine 500 tanks, hundreds of armored vehicles. There was hype all over the internet about the German Leopard tanks that were going to be the new super weapon that was going to annihilate the Russians, HIMARS and Storm Shadow and everything else. And here we are 2 months later. The estimated casualties on the Ukrainian side are more than 40,000. 40,000. Now, that is not, I mean, let's put this into perspective here. The United States had 50,000 casualties in the Vietnam War, a much bigger country in a period that went on for years and years. And you remember, well, those of you who are older than me, remember how devastating that war was to America. Now imagine a country the fraction of our size losing that quantity of soldiers in 2 months. And that's on top of the casualties that have taken place everywhere else. So what's going to happen now? By the way, I have no military experience. I'm not a geopolitics professional. How is it that I predicted 2 months ago that the Ukrainian offensive was going to come to nothing? Well, because I listened to people whose opinions were reliable on it, people like Doug McGregor and Scott Ritter, and they were all saying these same things. They're like, the math doesn't add up. Russia has far more people, they have far more equipment, they have the determination, and all the things that we say are going to work are not going to work. And lo and behold, that's all it took. But if you follow the mass media, the story was going to be absolutely, completely different. It was, let me see if I can pull up a map of Ukraine here so I can show you what the plan actually was. In fact, you know what, before I pull up the map, there was a quote from a British admiral told reporters what the Ukrainian strategy was at the beginning of the counteroffensive, which was absolutely planned and coordinated between American and British intelligence. He said there was a 3S plan: to starve, stretch, and then strike. So the first part was going to be the starvation stage, where the armed forces of Ukraine were going to launch attacks on the logistics centers of the Russian armed forces, making it difficult to supply them. This would be then followed by a stretching, numerous reconnaissance and force, false strikes all over the place, mixed with attempts at real breakthroughs, so that the Russian army would be pulled apart, would deplete its reserves. And at the final stage, a powerful blow to the identified gaps in the defense of the Russian forces was going to happen. But it turned out, well, the first problem was with the starvation, the starvation stage, which was, it turns out that Russia has these big, sophisticated air defenses, and the Ukrainians didn't have the American super weapons they thought they did. And they didn't succeed in smashing any Russian logistics centers. Then the stretch thing didn't work out. They did not achieve any breakthroughs anywhere. Russian forces repelled them all over the place. And in the process, caused enormous casualties, huge numbers of losses. And also almost 40% of Russian equipment delivered in the recent months was destroyed. And then about the main thrust was going to be, here, let me pull up the map now so I can show you what they were planning to do. What they were planning to do. I just realized now, because you're not going to see the cursor on my screen, this might not work out too well, but I will try my best to make this clear. Let me pull up the map here. Here is the map. So here's Ukraine. There's the Black Sea. This, you do see my cursor. Great. Okay. Perfect. So the plan was a thrust down in the Zaporozhye direction towards where's Melitopol? Let's see here. Let me try to put this. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Right. This is the main border. This is the Dnipro River. Kherson. Okay. So their plan was to go from Zaporozhye here down towards Melitopol, down into Crimea, isolate Crimea, blow up the Crimean bridge, and recapture Crimea. That was their plan. Instead, they did not even make it to the Russian defensive lines. They've been fighting in the gray zone this entire time. Now, I read approximately 100 to 200 battle reports every single day. And all the time you hear about fighting in these villages, Piatihatki and Robotyno and what's another little one? Anyway, the point being, they're not even talking about capturing cities. They're trying to capture villages. And they haven't made it anywhere. So now this story, let me go back to that story again. They say, somewhere here they say, the Ukrainians say, all we need is arms and patience. Let me see if I can find that quote here. No, I don't want to. Two things that we need to keep asking our allies for are weapons and patience. Well, what good is patience going to do if the Ukrainian army is getting weaker and weaker all the time? That the whole point of this offensive was this is going to change the tide of battle. And it has done absolutely nothing. In fact, Russia's advancing in the north. Ukraine's probably had a net loss of territory over the course of the offensive. Since then, we've also seen Biden announce that we're sending cluster bombs to Ukraine because we don't really have any more regular 155 millimeter artillery shells left. Oh, we're running low on artillery to give ourselves. Almost, we're pretty much out. You know, I mean, we probably need to keep some for ourselves, you know, but apart from that, we're sending our last big scraps. There was also, let me see if I can pull this up. Here's a story from British intelligence. This just came out 3 days ago. This is amazing. Here's a story. This is from the British Ministry of Defense, and they say, undergrowth regrowing across the battlefields of southern Ukraine is likely one factor contributing to the generally slow progress of combat in the area. The predominantly arable land in the combat zone has now been left fallow for 18 months, with the return of weeds and shrubs accelerating under the warm, damp summer conditions. This extra cover helps camouflage Russian defensive positions and makes defensive minefields harder to clear, although undergrowth can also provide cover for small, stealthy infantry assaults. The net effect has been to make it harder for either side to make advances. Foliage and vegetation. That's why the Ukrainians are having difficulty making advances. Sure. So, with all that going on, there was also a big NATO Summit last month. That was the thumbnail that we had for this show. It was a terrible event for Zelensky. Of course, you have to imagine this event was planned with the understanding that there was going to be this huge Ukrainian breakthrough, and now we're going to talk about the next stage of the process and yada yada. And instead, everything went wrong, and it became this debacle where the Western leaders were snubbing Ukraine. Where I think there was an incident where I think it was I think it might have been Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, who complained that Zelensky was not thankful enough, and then the next time Zelensky said something, he said thank you like 50 times in one speech or something. And I think the big takeaway from the Vilnius summit was that America doesn't like Ukraine. Biden doesn't like Zelensky, and Zelensky doesn't like Biden. But as Biden himself said, Zelensky is stuck with them. So there you go. The other big spin has been Ukraine has not been following what America trained them to do. We trained you guys in combined arms warfare. Why are you trying these stupid infantry assaults? You should have done what we told you to do with these combined arms attacks. And yeah, the weird thing is every time Ukraine's tried these combined arms attacks, it's been a complete disaster because, first of all, Ukraine doesn't have aviation. And secondly, because the Russians target the heavy tanks. They target that's the first thing about the Leopard tanks. They're like, let's make trophies out of these. Let's destroy these Leopard tanks. The British Challenger tanks haven't even been used yet. Britain doesn't want to see their tanks burning. But every time that they've tried these combined arms tactics, it's been a disaster. So the West spin is, well, Ukraine doesn't seem to know how to fight the way they should. So, hey, and this is, by the way, I think the spin leading towards, how they're going to try to spin their way out of the debacle that's happening is, well, we gave the Ukrainians everything we could, and darn it, they just weren't up to the task. That's the subtle subtext in all this talk about how the Ukrainians are just reverting to their old ways of fighting and their old Soviet ways. So there's that. But the other spin story too is that, and there have been some news stories about this thing. The real problem Ukraine has is with the Russian minefields. They're just getting destroyed by the Russian minefields. Well, yeah, Ukraine has a minefield problem. They also have an aviation problem. They also have a missile problem. They also have an artillery problem. They also have a glide bomb problem. And they also apparently have a foliage problem. So, this is a horrible thing. And that was why I showed you that footage. By the way, like I said, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of these videos. I've never seen one like that one before. Typically, when you see videos, it's either like you'll see a tank, or some other targeting. Sometimes you'll see a first-person view of the UAV going in, and then you switch to seeing another camera focusing on the target as there's an explosion. I've never seen video like that where it's just a drone, just lazily just kind of taking stock of everything that's going on. You just see the horrors of what's really happening there, and the scale of this is just beyond comprehension, folks. And it's incredible how the media just ignores all this stuff. To the extent that they cover it at all, it's all spin. As they say, it's all about the narrative. It's all about the narrative. It's not about the hundreds of thousands of people that are being killed over this. And it's just shocking. So what's Ukraine going to do now? Well, the thing they've tried this week are these drone attacks on Russian targets, which are, they're pinprick attacks. They're not damaging any serious military infrastructure in any major way. They're just making the Russians more determined to keep on fighting them. And what else has happened? Oh yeah, there is a grain deal that collapsed because Russia said, you guys haven't honored your end of the bargain, so we're pulling out of it. So there's been all of that. There, yes, isn't Donbass where the drone was generally? Oh yeah, Misha was a Russian soldier. Yeah, he was killed in the fighting. But for the purpose of that video, it wouldn't even matter whether the drone operator was Russian or Ukrainian. It's just footage of what's happening in the battle. That's the thing that I think is so incredible too, is the complete, total destruction of that city. That's what the war is. And the longer it goes on, the more cities are going to look like Marinka. So the other thing that's happening now is not the Vilnius Summit, the Jeddah conference, which again was going to be a conference after everything was going great for the West. Because remember what happened less than 2 weeks ago was they said, oh, that whole offensive that started in June. No, that wasn't really the offensive. The major push is happening now. Now we're having the major push. And once again, no effect. Haven't even made it into the Russian defensive lines. So the idea with this conference, Biden's next great idea was, let's get more countries on board with the war. Let's isolate Russia more. And the international community just said, nah, we don't even want to go. These aren't serious peace talks at all. Zelensky's terms for peace is basically unconditional Russian surrender, which are not really sensible terms when the opponent is defeating you in the battlefield. So the rest of the world's like, look, this is a disaster. We don't want anything to do with this. We all want this to end. And you guys need to get serious about negotiating. But Joe Biden does not have any negotiation in him. And this is kind of where we turn to see what the bigger picture is here. And the reason why I think this is so important is because what's Joe Biden's real goal right now? His goal is to get reelected next year. That's Joe Biden's goal. And the war being a complete disaster is not going to help him. He, I think, honestly thought that this was going to be a great triumph. Look at how we beat the crap out of the Russians. Remember, the subtext in the entire Trump presidency from the Democrats was Trump is a puppet of Putin and Trump is working for the Russians. And I think to that degree, because remember, Democrats believe that crap. They view Russia as a part and an appendage of Donald Trump, or Trump as an appendage of Russia, or something like that. That's where this existential hatred for Russia, in large part, not completely, obviously there's a lot of other aspects to it, but a huge part of it, because they get to believing their own narrative over time, is Russia gave us Donald Trump. We must destroy Russia. I have no doubt that is a big part of the Democrats' overall agenda. And now they're going to be going into an election where Joe Biden has, first off, made a complete catastrophe out of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. He has allowed peace to break out in the Middle East by ignoring it, strangely enough. He has driven Russia and China together, two countries which now both view us as an enemy that neither of them asked for, but we made them into our enemies. And now, of course, there's this explosive, these developments in Africa. So everything's falling apart on every foreign policy front. What do you think Joe Biden's going to do? You think he's going to just walk out of Ukraine the way they walked out of Afghanistan? My money is on escalation. Stephen Gothel says, how about the Ukrainian Biolabs? Yeah, there was that too. There was that. For those who don't know, a lot of the stuff that, a lot of the dirty bioweapon research we can't do in our country, we were doing in Ukraine. There's a lot of secrets in Ukraine. There's a lot of secrets in Ukraine, which also, I think, leads to another major element of this that needs to be talked about, and nobody else will, but I will tell you something. By the way, apologies for the title of this video. I will fix it. It's supposed to be, what will Biden's next blunder be? Oops. We all make mistakes. There's been another big story from Ukraine since this past week, and that is, we talked about this on the show a few weeks ago, Gonzalo Lira. He was arrested by the Ukrainian authorities on, I think it was May 1st, or maybe it was June 1st. But Gonzalo Lira was an American citizen, dual citizen of Chile and America, who was a YouTuber who was critical of Ukraine. And he had been arrested briefly in 2022 for about a week, and then he came back on. And because apparently, I mean, we don't know, he didn't specify the details, but the assumption was the State Department told Ukraine, knock it off, he's an American citizen. And apart from that, there's nothing much more to say about who Gonzalo Lira really is. He's a YouTuber, no different from myself. He didn't have any inside information. He wasn't looking at Ukrainian secrets or anything like that. He was just like me, just some guy on YouTube making an opinion. And he was arrested and charged a week ago or so. No, I'm sorry, a couple months ago, with expressing an opinion that was supportive of Russia or dangerous to Ukraine or something like that. I've got the, in fact, let me see if I got the, yeah, the actual charge was producing and disseminating materials that justify the armed aggression of Russia. So in other words, an opinion crime. An American citizen detained and charged with making an opinion crime. So Gonzalo actually resurfaced a week or so ago. And I'm going to find this clip because I want to play it for you. Chat, let me know if you don't see, if you don't have audio on this. But I think it should work. Yeah, let me pull this up real quick. Present, share screen. I'll do entire screen, see if that works. Here we go. This is Gonzalo Lira. All right, no audio. Here, let me try one more thing. And if this doesn't work, then we'll have to reconsider how we do this. Let's try this again. Let's try this. Present, share screen. Let me try it as a tab. Sometimes that does the trick.
Hey, how's it going? It's been a while. I hope you've had a good time. I didn't have such a good time. I spent 9.5 weeks in prison here in Ukraine. I've been out on bail since July 6th. Today is July 31st. And to prove the time, I just checked on my subscription. Defense Politics Asia, which is a pretty good channel, just put out a video called Niger on the Brink of Regional War. That should prove the time that I'm recording this video. Now, at the same time that I'm posting this video, I'm posting a long thread on my Twitter account. My Twitter account is Gonzalo Lira 1968. Gonzalo Lira 1968, one word altogether. And in that, I discuss what has happened to me over the past 3 months in some detail. I also include the indictment against me that I'm going to be tried on. I'm going to be tried on Wednesday, August 2nd, the day after tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I posted both the original Ukraine language version and the translation. The translation was by the court-appointed translator, so I have no idea if it's accurate or not. Those of you who speak Ukraine will be able to give a better sense as to whether that translation is accurate.
We're not going to watch the entire
clip. That's besides the point. I put up the entire indictment in both the original and the translation so that you can see exactly what I was charged with and imprisoned for. Now,
all right, I'll stop it there because it's a long video. I'm not going to play the entire video on the stream, and it's actually a three-parter, so it's like 45 minutes. But the long and short of it is, he cut off his tether, drove his motorcycle to the Hungarian border, and was going to try to seek asylum in Hungary, and was never heard from since. Meaning he was probably intercepted and rearrested by the Ukrainian authorities, the SBU, their version of the FBI. And is in all likelihood now currently in a prison labor camp. And the thing that people need to keep in mind is that that's a very serious breach of foreign relations, a very serious breach for an allied country, not just an allied country, but a supplicant country to allow to detain a citizen of the United States to be charged with an opinion crime is beyond provocative. Allegan News says maybe he should have gone to the U.S. Embassy. Well, the U.S. Embassy didn't help him the first time. But that's the interesting question, and that's what I want to get to here. Because, it's one thing when, Americans detain a Russian and Russians detain an American. We're not friends. And sometimes those kind of things happen. But the U.S. Embassy would have had to make one phone call to Ukraine over all of those months and said, deport them. Just send them out of your country, bring them back to the United States. He could have been in New York later that same day. You don't want him there, you don't have to have him there. But he's an American citizen. And had the State Department made that call, Gonzalo Lira would be a free man. But here's the million-dollar question. Why does Ukraine think they can detain an American citizen with impunity? That's the million-dollar question. Not necessarily. Now, you might say, well, Victoria Nuland hates Gonzalo Lira and she doesn't care that he's rotting in Ukrainian prison. Maybe so. But why would Ukraine think they can detain an American citizen with impunity? I think there's only one real explanation for it. And it goes back to Joe Biden and Burisma and Hunter Biden. Remember when Trump was running for office? When Trump had gotten into office, that's when the Russia stuff started. And the Democrats went crazy saying, Russia has compromising information on Trump. Russia has this dossier on Trump and they're going to be able to blackmail Donald Trump. And it was all complete BS, but that's what the Democrats said. What American interests are being served by the war in Ukraine at this point? And why does Ukraine think they can detain an American? Maybe there is some blackmail. Maybe, and here's the big story from America this week, by the way. It's not the BS indictment of Trump, which, interesting how all these indictments of Trump come to things that are not exactly really crimes. Trump denied the election. That's a crime now. Whereas the indictments of Hunter Biden are, more prosecutable crimes, things that courts are familiar with and have done before. Gun charges, drug charges, corruption charges, serious crimes. Serious crimes for which, Joe Biden has at some point even admitted to when, sorry, my phone made a noise. Like that time Joe Biden got up in front of the cameras at the Council on Foreign Relations and said, yeah, I told Ukraine that that I'm going to withhold your $1 billion in aid if you don't fire the prosecutor who's investigating Burisma, the company that my son is paid, was it $40,000 a month to do nothing for. And son of a bitch, they fired him, Joe Biden says. Ha, 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 ha. Maybe there is some blackmail involved. Maybe there is a reason. Yeah, Patty, I got another text too. You're welcome to come on now if you'd like. We're probably getting back to the Michigan and United States part of the show coming pretty soon. But that's the thing. And that's where this all needs to start looking. And that's where the Republicans in the House, if they have any brains whatsoever, need to look into is the cover-up of Joe Biden's corruption and what the Ukrainians might potentially have on him that's compelling his administration to send hundreds of billions of dollars and American soldiers and American weapons into a war that's killed hundreds of thousands of people. Because that might be an impeachable offense. More so than contesting an election or making a phone call. Maybe starting what might potentially be World War III to conceal your corruption is a slightly impeachable offense. And maybe if Republicans can stop playing defense and start going on counter offense the way they should be, we might actually get there. So what else has been going on? Well, there's more stuff about Ukraine, but I think that probably covers the big stuff. But there's been some big news in Michigan this past week. More indictments now. The most recent ones have been Matt DePerno, And Stephanie, I'm going to say Stephanie Lambert because the other part of her last name, I really don't know how to pronounce correctly. And I don't want to hurt myself trying. And former Representative Dare Rendon have been, and this is actually probably from the week before last, but we didn't talk much about that last week. These 3 more indictments. And the way it looks to me here, I'll pull up the story about the indictments. Let's see, where I've got it here someplace. Here we go. Where'd my stream go? Where's the headline? Here it's hiding behind an ad. Pro-Trump attorney, the 3rd indicted in Michigan vote machine probe. Stephanie Lambert is indicted by a grand jury on allegations of breaking into voting machine tabulators. Says she's done nothing illegal. And interestingly, they did not charge some other people, including Barry County Sheriff Dar Leaf. And there were some other people. I think there was originally 9 the prosecutor was looking at, but they've narrowed it down to 3. And apparently, let's see here. Here's this is an important paragraph. 6 of the suspects won't face charges. The decision not to charge the others was based on careful consideration of the tally of evidence, review of witness statements, evaluation of the law related to viable defenses, and decisions on what's fair and just. Local election clerks that allegedly allowed DePerno and others to examine their voting equipment had no idea the scope, nature, or duration of how their tabulators were going to be manipulated, the prosecutor added. What this suggests to me is that the clerks basically said, the attorneys told us it was okay to do this, and therefore they went ahead and gave him the voting machines. And so now they're charging DePerno and the others with having access to voting machines, which apparently, according to Michigan law, they can't do that. I have not verified this, but according to this judge, it says only the Secretary of State or a court can authorize access to a voting machine. Could be true. Could be true. Those of you who've been following us from the beginning, when you saw my earlier shows talking about the voting machine stuff, said this was never a smart course to go down. The elections, I wonder if I should shut off my YouTube stream right now. I'll take my chances. The issues with the 2020 and 2022 elections were relating to absentee ballots. That's always been the point of vulnerability, not the voting machines. But people wanted to go down that rabbit hole. Never a wise thing to do. And look, I'm not gonna badmouth DePerno now that he's under indictment. I would just say this: this is not going to end well. And I have a lot more sympathy for the electors. And I got an email from Matt DePerno today asking for support for his legal defense. If there's anybody who needs support for the legal defense, it's going to be the electors. The electors who were exercising their constitutional role, which is to be the Republican Party's electors, to challenge the results of the election, as is their right. And as I said last week, as Democrats have always done whenever Republicans win. So their case has precedent. The judge should dismiss the case as a matter of law. I assume the judge won't. And that's going to be a nightmare for all the defendants, because if the judge does not dismiss the case as a matter of law, even though the judge should, but the judge will probably do the wrong thing. Tim Kuhn says, any device connected to a network is vulnerable. Wrong. Sorry. Maybe we can talk about this more another time, but I want to move on from this point. But it's not that simple. Anyway, if the judge allows the case to proceed, the only option they have to stop the case from going to trial is called an interlocutory appeal, which appeals courts almost never ever take up. What they almost always do is they allow the process to play out, and then if a defendant is convicted, they might have the conviction overturned on appeal after they've already spent all of their money on their legal defense. And any attorney can tell you, when you're charged with a felony, your obligation is to spend all your money on your legal defense, period. And even that will never be enough. So the damage is almost certainly going to be absolutely immense for all of them. And that's a terrible crime. So if there's anybody worth supporting, right now at this moment, I'd say it's the electors, not the people that decided to. Yeah, Barry Doherty says convictions by process. Exactly. Allegan News says the clerk who gave access should also be charged. Maybe. But what often happens, what prosecutors often do is they say, okay, look, we can get you on this charge, but we've got a bigger fish that we want to get. If you say the things we want you to say, then we'll let you walk away. That's probably what's going to happen. And that does happen. That does happen all the time. I think I told my story about it last week. That's the way prosecutors operate. Jessica says, yes, the goal is to ruin the elector's public reputation and personally bankrupt them. Yep. And to intimidate anybody else from doing the same thing. Yep. But that being said, the defendants now are all on their own. I think they're going to have to all have their own attorneys, because one potential legal strategy is to throw your co-defendants under the bus, and you can't have one attorney doing that with multiple defendants. So it's going to get astronomically expensive. And that's really, really, really painful. You know, some of these people I know, several of them I know personally. I've known Marion Sheridan for years. I've known Michonne Maddock for years. I've known Tim King for years. Don't know Hank Choate well, but I met him. These are patriotic people. Yeah, Julian Marks says lawfare at its finest. Yeah. And here's the reality, folks. Politics is a contact sport. And oftentimes the threats are real. And people I know personally have gone to jail for things that they've been accused of doing. Things I don't know personally if they've done them or not. But, you know, the guy who was Ron Paul 2012's campaign chairman served, I think, 2 years in prison. I think he might even still be there right now. Lawfare is a real thing. And it is an intimidation tactic. And all you can do is resolve to do everything that you can and work even harder and try even harder to save our country, knowing the additional burdens that we have, knowing that people who put themselves in the line, and those who have known Marion and Michonne know that they've worked their tails off for years and years and years to take back our state and our country. We owe it to them to carry on the fight. That's just all there is to it. So, on that note, let's talk about some more things that have been going on in Lansing this week. We've got some new bills to check out. The legislature was adjourned for pretty much the entire month of July. There were no votes in July, but they did have a couple days of session, and that doesn't really do much, but it allows the legislature to receive statements from the governor, and it also allows bills to be filed. So there's been some new bills filed, and I will show you. We have some interesting new ones that have been filed over the break. Let's look at this one first. This one boggles my mind. I'll pull it up here. House Bill 4907 to reinstate a failed taxpayer subsidy for movies. This is a program that Michigan administered for years and years to give film credits to movie makers. And this has been an absolute disaster of a program that the legislature finally got rid of because it made no money at all. Let me see if I can find the article about it. Hold on. Yeah, here's the story from the Mackinac Center. Let's see if I can push this in here. I got to stop and restart the screen. That's a wrap. Film subsidies terminated. 2015 bill ending program now a law. For Michigan taxpayers, the program that was launched in 2008 has been a colossal flop. After delivering hundreds of millions of Michigan taxpayer dollars to film studios, there were 102 fewer film industry jobs in the state, according to federal employment statistics. Other states' film incentive programs have also been shown to be a waste. And then James Hillman says, scholars across the spectrum agree that subsidizing filmmaking is a waste of taxpayer dollars. We applaud Michigan legislators and the governor for eliminating this program. And guess who sponsored this proven failure of a program that existed for years and was a proven failure? Lots of Democrats and these Republicans. Bill Schuette, John Roth, there's his name again. Kathy Schmaltz, there's her name again. Matt Bierlein, Doug Wozniak. I believe in the Senate version, I'll have to look it up, but I think in the Senate version, no Republicans co-sponsored, perhaps because the senators and the Republicans in the Senate have careers of going back to remembering when the film subsidy program was scrapped. The Democrats have obvious motivation for this program because, hey, this is campaign cash from Hollywood. That's what they're going to get from it. We have Republicans who are dumb enough to give taxpayer subsidies to a program that's already been proven to fail. Steven says, support Ukraine, support Hollywood. Yes, support anybody but hardworking Michigan people. Incredible. So there was that bill. Wait, guys, trust me, it gets worse. Oop. Looking at my notes here. How'd that get on the screen? Anyway, let's see here. What's the next story? 4904. Let's look at that one. Hold on, gotta put my screen back on. $49.04. Here's one we'll all love. Expand the bottle deposit law to include water and juice. Patty says I was hacked. I don't think so. I think that was my own mistake. Now, if you guys don't know this, the entire recycling program, at least for glass and plastic, is a complete environmental disaster. I actually got to tour the Shupan plant. They're the recycling company that takes in all the bottles from Kroger and recycles them, and got to see the factory that processes these empty bottles. You wouldn't believe what it takes to make it possible for a plastic bottle to be able to be returned to the manufacturer. It is extraordinary to see all these machines they have to remove the caps, remove those little rings. They've got to get every shred of the plastic labeling off. They've got to get them dried out. It's gross. It's extremely labor intensive, extremely energy intensive. And for glass, it's even crazier because they have to return the glass to the manufacturer. So you're talking about shipping glass. It's a huge cost for obviously everyone that buys drinks, because if you don't return the bottle, then you lose the deposit. It's a pain. Well, you guys all know this. It's a pain hauling the returnables back to the place. The bottles stink up your house or your garage or your kitchen. It's disgusting. And at the end of the day, it doesn't accomplish anything, but it makes the environmentalists feel good. So now the Democrats want to expand this program. And by the way, of course, there's campaign money in this from Shupan. Campaign money in this here too. And all the usual wackos supporting it. Jamie Churches, Felicia Braybeck. She's the one that sponsored the bill to ban detransitioning therapy. Betsy Kofia. The usuals. Tim Kuhn says, that cannot be the worst. Oh, you're right, Tim. It's not the worst. We got another one. Let's see. Oh, good. My notes didn't pop up on the screen this time. Let's look at House Bill 4893. Whitmer Care. Whitmer Care, ladies and gentlemen, sponsored by Carrie Rangans, another one of these nutcases from Ann Arbor. Let's look at what this bill does. Oh, you know what? I need to switch how I share the screen again. Here we go. House Bill 4893. A new MI Care Act. I've got a different name for it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's only just been introduced now, but introduced by all of those Democrats. Looks like more than half of their caucus. A bill to provide for the, let me see if I can make this bigger. There we go. A bill to provide for the establishment of a universal and unified healthcare system and to reform the current payment system for healthcare coverage in the state to create certain boards, powers, duties, yada, yada, yada. So let's see what they're talking about here. The MyCare Act, definitions. And here we go. The healthcare reform efforts under this act must, okay, wait, maybe. Here we go. Section 107. The director shall coordinate healthcare system reform efforts among executive branch agencies, departments, and offices. Shall coordinate with the board. The implement of a healthcare system. There's something I'm missing here that I skipped over. I got to go back and see. Stephen Goethel asks, healthcare for illegals? I'd assume so, but let's see what it says. The healthcare reform efforts under this act must include a simplified administration process and delivery, yada, yada, yada. The director shall establish a strategic plan that includes timelines and allocations of the responsibilities associated with the healthcare system reform to include health outcomes, further the state's existing healthcare system reform efforts, and to further all of the requirements of this section. Hold on. Yeah, I did skip over the bad part. Let's see here. Hold on. Well, anyway, I'll look through this until I find it, but the gist of it is, here we go, MyCare. Director shall obtain waivers, exemptions, and legislation or a combination of these to ensure that, to the extent possible in the federal law, all federal payments provided within the state for health services are paid directly to MyCare. MyCare shall assume responsibility for the benefits and services previously paid for by federal programs, including Medicaid, Medicare, MyChild, and after implementation, the exchange. So somewhere here, I'm trying to find it. It actually says that it's creating its own health plan. Here it is. Found it. As provided in Chapter 4, all residents of this state, that's you and me, are eligible for MyCare, a universal health care program that will provide coverage through a single payment system. To the extent allowable under federal law, etc. I already read that part. So they're talking about creating a universal healthcare scheme through which all federal money will go, and all payments will go through them. So I'm not going to read this entire thing, but you get the idea, folks. This is socialized medicine in Michigan. It's a 34-page bill. As a framework for reforming healthcare, the director should utilize and ensure these principles: universal access to and coverage for high-quality, medically necessary health services for all residents of this state. So that answers your question, Steve. Yes, illegals are residents of this state. And including overcoming systemic barriers, not limited to inadequate information, transportation needs, geographic distribution of providers do not prevent residents of the state from accessing health services. And I am sure the word equity is in here someplace. Let's just see. Equitably distribute health services while acknowledging the connection between fair and sustainable payment and access to healthcare. So there you go. So that's MyCare, folks. Which, if this goes anywhere at all, this is Whitmer Care. So there it is. What else do we have? Well, that's basically the news for this week, folks. It has been a busy past week for me, just kind of catching up on things since I was out of town. This other week will be busy too. I've got 2 parades, a festival to organize, and there's also an event that we're doing in my county. Allegan News says free trans surgery, probably. Why not? Pure socialism. Yes, it is. By the way, Obamacare was hugely unpopular, so this is an issue to run on. If you are in a district that perhaps includes some of these people, such as let's see, who here is vulnerable? Oh, interesting. They didn't put any vulnerable Democrats on it. Telling. But this will be something to mobilize about anyway, because this might be one that just rammed through in lame duck. So, with that, I would just say we have an obligation to recapture the narrative. And that means talking to all of your neighbors about all the things that the Democrats in Lansing are doing, all of the bills they've passed, and there's no shortage of that. And of course, what's going on with the Democrats in Washington and the fact that not a single one of them has any interest whatsoever in talking about the very real and very serious crimes that Joe Biden should be held liable for. Allegan News says they will have insurance lobby going after this bill. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. We will see. Remember, Whitmer's background is with Blue Cross Blue Shield. They'll figure out some way to make sure everybody gets paid. This is the summertime, folks. This is the time to go out knocking on doors. And I hope you guys have gotten some walk days scheduled. I know I scheduled 2 this past week. It's time to start organizing, mobilizing, and the target needs to be the Democrats. You need to start going on offense, folks. I mean, I know it's tempting to wallow in the injustice that's been going on. By the way, speaking of that, I want to show something else. I saw this today. Something has to be said about this. This is a tweet from good old cat turd. And, oh my God, ha 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 ha. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social. I purposely didn't comment on Nancy Pelosi's very weird story concerning her husband, but now I can because she said something about me with glee. That was really quite vicious. I saw a scared puppy, she said, as she watched me on television like millions of others that didn't see that. I wasn't scared. Nevertheless, how mean a thing to say. She is a wicked witch whose husband's journey from hell starts and finishes with her. She is a sick and demented psycho who will someday live in hell. I see how Cat Turd finds this stuff funny. To me, this doesn't convey strength. This conveys defensiveness, weakness. He says, I purposely didn't comment on Nancy Pelosi's very weird story, but now I can because she said something mean about me. Why didn't you say it? What Trump is just saying, you're pulling punches. What a mean thing to say, Trump says. There's so many better ways that Trump can be on offense. And I wish he was better at it. And I don't know what's going on. I see you guys in the chat. Trump 2024, love it. Look, I want Trump to beat Biden. I want him to get better at doing it. My comment on Twitter in response to this was, everyone else who's resigned to supporting him in the general election finds this distressing. Because he's not on offense. He's not talking about Joe Biden's crimes. He's talking about Nancy Pelosi's a meanie. Nancy Pelosi's a meanie? That's where he's at now? I hope Trump wises up. But having not done so up to this point makes me nervous. But it's our obligation, either which way, to be always on offense. I forget who said it. It might have been Andrew Breitbart. Attack, attack, attack. Never defend. Never defend. The only answer to someone attacking you is to counterpunch. And everything that we say to voters needs to be about the crimes of the Democrats, the dangerous policies of the Democrats, and the mass media's complicity. That, I think, is a critical issue. And that was the number one thing that drove me to Trump in 2016, was him calling out the mass media. And the mass media are burying all the attacks. The mass media are parroting all of the Democrats' talking points on everything that everything that's going on with the electors and everything else. And you know, to this day, guys, last week, I've gotten calls and emails from people. What can we do about the 2020 election? Get over it. There's an election coming up. And if we keep obsessing about relitigating 2020, we're going to lose the next one. And that might be the last one we get even eligible to run in. And who knows? Who knows where the debacle in Ukraine is going to take Joe Biden? Vladimir Zelensky canceled the upcoming elections in Ukraine. He criminalized the opposition parties, and he criminalized dissent in his country. Joe Biden would like to do the very same thing here. That's why he's weaponizing the legal system against anyone that speaks out against him. Mark says, Lord willing, if Trump gets the presidency again in 2024, which I believe Trump was cheated of in 2020, he may be the first two-time president since he'd be the first two-time president since Grover Cleveland. Yeah, I am with you 100%. But he's not going to be able to do it himself. He needs people who are right now practicing, going out, knocking on doors, building networks right in their own precincts, and being able to make a grassroots mobilization for victory in the upcoming elections. And secondly, he needs to get smart about doing better for himself, because frankly, this is a time when Trump himself needs to be the one who is saying all the things that I hear from like people like Robert Barnes about how unjust these prosecutions are, instead of just saying Nancy Pelosi's a meanie, articulating, or you know, this Jack Smith is a witch hunt, blah 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 blah. He needs to be articulating the legal arguments that his supporters can repeat them to the voters, but he's not doing that. And if Trump supporters go out and knock on doors and the message to voters is, it's a witch hunt, it's all a big witch hunt, they're not going to persuade voters. Here's an argument you can make to voters. An argument that should have been made in 2020, but really wasn't. But it's not too late to make it for the next election. The entire 2020 campaign hinged upon a question to the American people, which is, who's responsible for the constant barrage of craziness in the media? And the Democrats' answer was Donald Trump. That was the question that the American people were debating. The Democrats' promise to the voters was, if you just defeat Trump and you elect Joe Biden, all this craziness will go away, the adults will be back again, and it'll be back to normal. It'll be just like it used to be, where everything's fine, and I mean, things are happening, but you don't hear about them. And the American people bought that. And now the message is a lot clearer. The media, being controlled by the Democrats, were the ones causing all of that anxiety throughout the Trump years because of their determination to destroy Donald Trump by any means possible. And the fact that Trump is still alive and breathing is the reason why things didn't stop when Joe Biden was elected. It's still lunacy every single day. Although now it's also lunacy of Joe Biden's making. Completely disastrous foreign policy, prices through the roof, lunacy with the radical transgender agenda, and everything else the Biden administration is trying to ram down our throats. That's the thing that voters need to understand, is that electing Joe Biden and the Democrats was not going to put an end to your suffering, because they were the abusers. They were the abusers, and they're going to continue to abuse you until you make them stop by removing them from power. Allegan News says they will just say now that if we put Trump in jail, we can go back to normal. Lincoln Project thinks that. Well, Lincoln Project are a bunch of political hacks. I don't care what they think. And no, it won't. No, it won't. I mean, first of all, that won't stop Trump's campaign. It won't stop Trump from getting the nomination. It'll probably guarantee it, if it's not already guaranteed, which it probably is. And it won't be, because as Trump is fond of saying, the real target's the American people. And that's what Joe Biden's next move is going to be. Because what's going to happen in Ukraine when NATO loses the war? It's a proxy war now. The next thing is dragging more people in. They don't put it past them not to drag the United States and NATO into a real World War III scenario, which means a nuclear exchange, which means forget about everything else. Means we might all be killed. Because that's what Russia's doctrine is. That's what our doctrine is. Once one nuke goes into the air, they all go. That means millions and millions of people dying. That means everything else is nothing. By the way, today's the anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. Tellingly, the government in Hiroshima didn't even say anything about which country bombed them. That's how subservient they are. But the rest of the world knows and remembers and is watching in fear at what might happen next. And the whole world is revolting against the Biden administration. Well, except for Western Europe, but who cares about them? But the ascendant powers, China, India, Brazil, they all can't stomach Joe Biden. Saudi Arabia can't stomach Joe Biden. The Middle East has had enough of Joe Biden. Foreign leaders actually like Trump, you know that? I mean, not the crazy Western ones, but everybody else, they liked him. Remember, someone made a great point. I think it was probably the Duran made this point, that the United States does not have any professional diplomats or any professional generals for that matter. All they have is political hacks and ideologues. And all they understand is winning and losing. Everything's a zero-sum game. Whereas, professional diplomats understand that everything is give and take. And no one gets everything they want, but you make compromises. You make deals. And what was Trump? He was all about deal making. That's what Trump was all about, was making deals. And everybody, all these other world leaders liked that. They liked that he was someone they could deal with. Whereas Joe Biden understands only bullying, browbeating, and force, and making threats to anyone who goes against him. And the world's saying, you know what? We're starting to outnumber you. We're starting to have more wealth than you. We already have far more manufacturing than you. And combined, we probably have a much bigger military than you. So that's where things are going, folks. So I hope you guys start going out and knocking on doors and campaigning like your life depends on it, because it just may. So I think it's time to call it a stream. I'm going to end the show with another clip from that guy that made that first one, that unreal footage that we saw. Misha and Donbass is what he went by. Misha was actually an aerial reconnaissance volunteer in the Russian army. And he came to Donbass. He said he saw how Marinka was being stormed, realized that aerial reconnaissance was needed there. And so he became a volunteer. And he had said he was going to die there. And it turned out he did. But that footage we've never seen anything like. But this is war, and there's people on both sides dying in enormous numbers. And if we don't start standing up to our lawmakers now, the ones who are pushing for it constantly, then it's going to be us in the next videos. Daniel Lawless says these drone videos are heartbreaking. They really are, and they're far from the worst. Like I said, guys, I've watched hundreds of videos a day, and they are absolutely mind-blowing. I saw a video today of Ukrainians in a bunker with Ukrainian corpses complaining about the smell of it. I saw a video today of a Ukrainian position being hit by a TOS-1, which is basically a giant flamethrower that drops a firebomb and just kills everything within a radius from either from the heat or directly from smoke inhalation. Tim Kuhn says, if not Trump, what's the backup plan? Ron DeSantis on the Republican side, and the Democrat side, RFK Jr. I think RFK is extremely interesting, and I think someone that we should be supporting, to tell you the truth. I think in Michigan we have an opportunity to, because guess what? our primary is not the major decider in the Republican primary. We can cross over and vote for RFK in an early primary. I think RFK is analogous to Ron Paul in his 2008 campaign. Remember when Ron Paul ran for president in 2008, George W. Bush was president. The Republican Party bosses were 100% in support of everything Bush was doing, all the neocon agenda in the Middle East and everything else, all that garbage. They didn't want to hear from someone like Ron Paul. They were all about John McCain and Mitt Romney, who I think we can now safely see with total clarity were the worst elements of the Republican Party. And Ron Paul had a powerful message that resonated with a lot of people. And when he didn't get the nomination, he refused to endorse the neocon nominees. McCain in 2008 and Mitt Romney in 2012. And so the Republicans lost both elections. And that paved the way for Donald Trump. And it also radically changed the Republican platform in a way that was suddenly serious about border security. Non-interventionist foreign policy became a huge thing for a lot of Republicans, not the corrupt establishment in Washington, obviously, but it changed the dynamics of the entire GOP. Everything that's happened since then started with the Ron Paul campaign. I think RFK has a huge potential to wake up Democrats. And maybe he won't win the nomination, but if he has a strong showing, lights up a lot of people, a lot of Democrats who will be reminded what Democrats used to support, like free speech. Democrats used to question big pharma. Remember, used to be all into the granola crunching hippie stuff. Now they're all on board with the vaccines and all the rest of that crap. RFK can, as Ron Paul did for Republicans, remind Democrats what their principles had been. And I know they're not our principles. I understand all that stuff about gun control and abortion and yada, yada, yada. He's bad on those. I get it. But a good man running against an evil establishment in a party can make a big difference. And if RFK loses the nomination, refuses to endorse Joe Biden, and Democrats stay home, and who knows, Trump or maybe even DeSantis run a smart campaign and defeat him, that will cause incredible soul searching in the Democrat Party and might get them to back off some of their more outrageous things they're doing now. Patty says RFK Jr. loves America. That counts for a lot too. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Anyway, that's going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thanks for all you do for liberty. We're going to close with another clip from Misha in Donbass. This was taken on, it must have been within days before he was killed. So I'm going to close with this clip, and we'll see you next week, guys. Have a great rest of your week. Peace.
Когда остынет день и падшая листва напомнит о тебе и что внутри меня, я больше не хочу смотреть в твои глаза, немые видеть боль и ночь спасения. Я больше не хочу встречать тебя во снах, вживую увидеть боль, прикосновения. Хотелось лишь взглянуть на дикий райский сад, где втоптаны в земле планеты ты и я. жалеть, мне прошлого не жаль. Огонь в моих глазах я заменю на лед. Во мне любовь и страх уж больше не живет.